know, whatever. It's hard to celebrate this year, to be honest. So instead of that, I'm going to read from a book I wrote called The Moonflowers. And I did write it under my pen name, Joni Aveline. And the reason why I had a pen name was because I wanted to categorize my work into more literary, which I did. I wrote a lot and I still write under that. This story has always been my 4th of July book. I wrote it around that time, and it's set in 1970s, the bicentennial. So coming around, this is a 4th of July story about America around the time of the bicentennial, set in the Midwest, which is where I grew up in. So just sit back and relax as I read you The Moonflowers. I know I wish I had to do that, but no, whatever. Okay, chapter 1. Jane thumbed through reading material in the dimly lit rear section of the IGA. 3 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. She couldn't decide Good Housekeeping or a paperback of the Height Report. Good Housekeeping had an article on keep your upholstery clean. But the Height Report was about orgasms and all the secret stuff of life. On impulse, Jane threw them both into the cart, followed of Ritz crackers and a discount box of Dreft. She made sure to hide the Height Report under the added items. No one in town needed to know she was an idiot about orgasms. Her best friend Suzanne came around the corner, pushing a shove in one hand and prodding her son Danny with the other. "Oh, hi, Jane," she said. Danny provided a very realistic sound effect of screeching tires before scrambling off to look at comics on the bottom shelf of the magazine rack. He's saving up to be in the Archie Fan Club. "Hey, I missed you last night at the PTA dinner. I mean, really missed you. It was boring as hell, but I had to go because Sally signed me up to make Jell-O. And then I got shamboozled into sticking around while she talked to all her friends. I was going to let her walk home with them, but she's been mentioning some 16-year-old boy she met at a dance, and I figured I'd better keep an eye on her. How are things?" "Fine." Jane took a quick moment to look at her stash to make sure she'd done a decent job of covering the Height Report. "Fine," Suzanne repeated. "You always say that. Well, when I'm fine, I'm fine. But I think when you're fine, you're really bummed out. Not everyone can be as fine as you, Suzanne." "True." Pursing her lips and touching her hair in a mock Marilyn pose, Suzanne swiveled her hips in a slow circle, ending with a pelvic thrust much too provocative for a weekday afternoon shopping trip at the local supermarket. That was something Jane had always loved and admired about Suzanne. She didn't give a rat's ass of what other people thought. They'd been friends since childhood, and Jane could never quite find herself being so free from social conscience. Unfortunately, it's her like fly tape. In silence, they rolled their carts to the next aisle of breads and cereals. Danny remained behind, reading his comic. Jane picked up and looked at the list she'd written, though she didn't have to, as the items never changed from week. Coffee, bread, milk, cornflakes, Jell-O, bologna, potatoes and lots of pork, and red meat. If she forgot, when Grant had a small fit and sent her back. "How's everyone?" Anne asked, taking a bite out of a strawberry from a little plastic crate before shoving it back in. Many of the strawberries had bites in them. Jane wondered if any inside to the checkout counter intact. "Grant's okay. Keith's doing well. They're down at the ball fields right now for a game." "Grant coaching again?" "No, he decided not to do that this year. A few weeks ago, the local baseball committee told Grant the other parents had started a petition to keep him off the fields. Grant was still allowed to attend games, but at a distance of 200 feet. Hi, Carl. You're here on time. I'm reading a book called The Moonflowers, set in 1976, a bicentennial, 4th of July, America, Midwest. So sit back if you want to listen. It's going to take a while. I'll try to reply to comments, but it's going to be hard back and forth, but I'll try. And happy you're here. Thanks for being here, Carl. Nice to see you. And by the way, Coco's walking back and forth, so yay. Yeah, that's story time. I've been meaning to do this forever, to read this book on the 4th of July, so on a live event, so I'm doing it. Okay, back to the story. Her husband Grant was still allowed to attend baseball games at a distance of 200 feet. Coco says hi back. It was all the cussing and the yelling. He now watched from the front seat of his car using binoculars. He often took Jane along. Those were some long, hot summer evenings. Jane tried her best to endure using paperbacks and paper fans made from thrown-out flyers. 13-year-old Keith said he was about the whole thing. He said he didn't get nervous while playing anymore. That man sure has a temper. Suzanne threw a box of Fruit Loops into her cart, looked at it for a second, then put it back, exchanged for Wheat Bran. At times, I don't know how you can stand it. Many wives put up with things they don't like. I won't be the first, Suzanne. Suzanne turned and placed her hand on Jane's arm. Women don't have to. Times have changed. She saw Jane blanch at her touch. I'll let it go. Oh, damn. What? I need to get some mini marshmallows. I'll be right. Jane watched her friend walk down the aisle with her usual hip-swaying swagger. It was true, her marriage to Grant had its problems, but the problem wasn't something she could go on and on about until she had an actual plan to fix things. And as far as fixing, how was a woman supposed to fix a marriage when she already did all the work and was left with an unwilling partner? The fixing had to come in two different forms. Grant fixed himself, or she fixed a divorce. Both of those would not come without a fight. She knew it. Pressure was building. All those hot evenings in the car had opened a space in her mind she thought never existed. A space which had no room for good wife thoughts. It was angry and tired. It didn't like men. It didn't like marriage. And it didn't like Grant. And then there was sex, something Jane had recently begun to understand would never come to her pleasurably the way it did other women. Jane reached under her pile of goods to retrieve the paperback. She shoved it into a shelf between two loaves of Wonder Bread, then, after staring a moment, pulled it again. Why did she so desperately want to know other women's thoughts on the subject? An image flashed in Jane's mind of being pinned under Grant, his hot, thick body like a wall, a prison. She thought of his now, and there was always a feeling of claustrophobia and a need to run somewhere. She saw Suzanne's black leather flats and bright red pants coming around the corner and rooted the book into its protective pile inside her cart. You okay? You look sort of sick. Suzanne's face showed concern. It's just hot in here. Yeah, it is. Let's pay for all this junk. I was going to talk to the butcher about a beef for that new freezer Sasha bought, but I need a cigarette, so I think I'll just go home quick. You want to come over? Jane smiled. No, I need to take these things home, too. You want me to drive you? No, thanks. I can walk. Suzanne yelled for Danny to put down whatever he was reading. He didn't respond, so Suzanne yelled even louder. I didn't want to be a yeller, but sometimes I swear he doesn't have any eardrums. Or at least they don't seem to work when it comes to my voice. I probably need to get his hair cut. That looked like a possible contributor. His brown hair was so thick it hung down similar to a Cocker Spaniel's. He came into the aisle with a sullen look, then followed them to the checkout counter in silence. Jane watched her friend pile groceries on the motorized belt line. What would Suzanne say when she saw the book? She'd know something was wrong, that's what. And then she'd start up a million questions. Jane looked behind to see if she could back out, pretending she'd missed an item. A man with long hair stepped in. They nearly ran into each other. She saw his eyes light up. It was clear he recognized her the same as she recognized him. He was the man who rode his motorcycle all over town. Stoltz. They passed each other every... Hello, he said. Hello. You must lot. Why do you say that? Because I see you coming out of the library every morning. Oh, that's me. That's me, all right. Jane looked at Suzanne to divert the conversation, but Suzanne was busy keeping Danny out of a candy dispenser. What do you like to read? He asked. Oh, everything. He was tall, and he was giving looks that didn't relate well to libraries and books. Well, I should go in there, but I haven't yet. He stepped closer. Don't be shy if you do, she said. I won't, he said. Jane saw his eyes lower to her breasts and back up to her face. He winked. Suzanne finished, paid, and then stood waiting with two brown paper balanced on her hips like toddlers. Danny stood waiting as well. Why not wait for me outside? Jane hurried to get her items on the moving belt. She blew a strand of hair from her face. Suzanne grew impatient. Sounds good to me. Come on. Danny was being a brat. He wanted a bottle of RC Cola from the vending machine by the... I said, come on. Suzanne grabbed him by the ear, though it was mostly hair, and led him out to the parking lot. Jane grabbed the height, plopped it on the counter with the good housekeeping. There. If he saw who cared. He wasn't some upstanding citizen she should consider opinions from. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw him place his items down behind a few inches to show whose was whose. A package of Twinkies, pork rinds, a box of fried chicken from the deli, and a couple bars of chocolate were his contributions. She couldn't help it. She had to say something. Not look like a proper supper. I ain't interested in proper, I just want to eat. Well, why should she care about his eating habits when he didn't? The cashier rang up her items and a stock-boiled boy piled them into bags. The height report. Jane shoved it down. The man laughed. I eat trash. You read trash. Guess we're even. Jane left without saying anything. Walking out, she saw Suzanne's light blue Chevelle idling in the lot. It pulled up and Suzanne spoke through the driver's side window. Why don't you come over so we can chat? Jane knew what kind of chat Suzanne had in mind, the marital kind. I'd love to, but I have to get these groceries home. How about tomorrow? Readjusting the bags on her hips, Jane agreed she'd come over then. It was the only way to Suzanne off her back for the time being. They said their goodbyes and the Chevelle drove off. Jane felt the sun beating down as she stood there on the asphalt. Her scent could barely keep the heat of the concrete away. It spread through to her soles like a sizzling hot plate and made her stomach and crotch seized with a weird ache. A motorcycle came to life with an obnoxious roar, revved on, choking a few times with big, explosive hiccups. That popping, raucous sound came near her, following her steady walk. She looked over her left shoulder through her hair to see. Would you like a ride to wherever you're going? It was the man. He revved repeatedly with feet skidding along the pavement as he steadied his bike. No, I'm all right, thank you. You ever ridden? Once. I didn't care for it. Jane refused to look at him. That wink earlier had told her what kind of things he had in mind. You must have had a bad driver. A good driver would make you want to ride again and again. Still, I'm just not the type, she said. You ain't, huh? Her feet burned standing there so long. Pretty soon, her cheap plastic sandals would melt and stick, and she'd have to walk like a flamingo, each foot plucking furious and hard. He was still there, idling. Those bags sure look heavy. You live far? Not really. Just down the road. Jane lifted her left hand to brush away a strand of hair. Yeah, I can see you're married. Just offering a ride, that's all. Oh. Her motion hadn't been to show her marital status, at least not on a conscious level. Don't worry about it. I'll see you around. Jane watched him jet off like a silver rocket from the parking lot to the street. No doubt he was breaking the limit of 35. She could hear him all through town until it faded. Not died, just faded, which meant he'd left town for whatever goal. Sip of water, too, coming up. Still here? Maybe Coco will come back. No guarantees, though. All right, chapter 2. Are you going to finish the whole book? I might. Well, my goal has always been to read this entire book on the 4th of July. Now, obviously, that's probably not going to happen. It's amazing when you write it, it takes to write it and edit it and publish it and all that good stuff. And then I can read an editor, and having written it, I can read through a book really fast, but reading it out loud online, yeah, that's probably going to be a little unrealistic. I'll just get partly there. And the book is about, let's see if I can read the back cover. It's 1976, and Jane, and I can put it here. It's 1976, and Jane and Keith Day are like the night blooming cereus, fragile petals that only come out after dark. Jane's never bloomed. For years, she's blanched under husband Grant's jalapeno words and firecracker fingers. Anyway, you can see, it's about the bicentennial, and it's about Jane Day and how she has to break away from her husband Grant, who, as you see in the course of the book, is very controlling, very harsh with her. And it's her time to blossom. And Keith is her son. Hi, Fatima. I'm good, and blessings to you. It's good to see you. Happy 4th of July, even though things are crazy right now, but we still have love. We still have love, and we still all have each other. So I'm reading from my book that I wrote my pen name. I've written a lot under my pen name, Joni Eveline. And this was a literary book I wrote, and I'm proud of it. I'm sure it has mistakes, but I wrote it, edited, and published it, and it's probably actually gotten the best reviews. Um, but it's about the 1976 bicentennial. Yeah, the drama of it all, yes. And it's about Jane Day, who needs to blossom and grow independent 4th of July. That can be more than just the country. It can be about people's independence in their life. And that's kind of why I wrote it. It has many meanings. And then Keith, I alternate chapters with her son Keith, and he needs to grow, become independent as well. He needs to grow up. And then Eric Church is the man that Jane begins to talk to as she grows in her independence. And he was in Vietnam and got a brain being in Vietnam. So I don't know, when I wrote this book, it was summer. It was one of those things where it just all flowed through me, and it was like the story I was meant to write. And I don't talk about that a lot, probably because it's under my pen name, but yeah, I wrote it. And so yeah, it's under my pen name, Joni Abilene. There's a sequel called The Starlights, and then the Love and Lust at the Dairy Stop Cafe. And so it's a trio of books about the small town, Midwestern town called Siltz. And so this was the first book. Yeah, I'm published. I've written a lot. I've written a lot. And around and read all my books, but I will read this book every once in a while. I'll read through, and also Love and Lust at the Dairy Stop Cafe, which is the third book. I really am proud of that book too. I love my characters and I love literary. And anyway, I've written a lot. Wait, post the title again, please. It's called The Moonflowers, and it's by Joni Abilene. If you look at my Amazon, yes, Amazon, I have several books, Kindle and print. I'm sure there's mistakes in them, but they're all written and edited by me. And very steeped in the small Midwestern America, 1970s era, and very like in the character's head. Small towns, because I grew up in a small town. Yeah, Joni Abilene. I don't know, it's A-B-I-L, so yeah. But it's okay, yeah, look it up. Maybe I'll post a link later. Anyway, this live, I have to cut the live in different parts just so that it can upload at some point. Thank you, Earl, thank you. And okay, so chapter 2, and this is, we're jumping into Keith's mind. And now Keith is their son, is Jane's son, and playing baseball on a hot field. So let's go into Keith's mind now. 1976, before the bicentennial. Okay, chapter 2. Yeah, I'll do this. I'll do this and try to read it with my crappy eyes, but we'll do our best. Okay. Chapter 2. A white bullet arched across the sky toward Keith Day. He thrust his mitt to catch it, but lost sight when the ball's trajectory met the sun. Swearing, he ran backwards to adjust position, but the ball hit the ground like an asteroid to the moon. We can ask about politics, and I'll do a separate video on that, but let me just say this. We're going to be okay. It's horrible right now. It's horrible. But you know what? We're going to come together. We're going to come together, and people are going to we're going to create our own Medicaid and Medicare. And we're going to survive this. It's hard. It is hard. But we're going to come together for each other, and whatever we have to do, we're going to work this out. And I don't see 45 being around for more than, like a year and a half from now. So we're going to, yeah. So just know that. Don't lose hope. America's been through horrible things before. The world has, but we're through it. Okay, back to the story. And get this. I may not hold up the book because I know that might be annoying to actually read along, have someone reading at the same time. So actually I am going to move it. If you want me to, I'll put the book back. There's a lot of pages. It's like 300 pages. No, 263 pages. So I've written really tight, which is, I love to write really tight, concise fiction, and that can be like 175 pages. It's about 50,000 words. But this, about 300. 300 is about standard for a regular novel. Let's go. Let's keep. So I'm just going to read it so you don't have the annoying thing of trying to read along and then going back and forth with the narrator. So it's yeah, I know. And I may not. I don't think I could read the entire book, but I'll come back later. We might have different parts of this. So okay, her son. Um, Keith heard his dad yell from a great distance, too far to see, but he knew that voice. It could wake him from death. Keith scrambled to retrieve the object he'd grown to despise. The ball played a game with him, rolling into the ground he'd already tripped over 3 times since the first pitch. The voice got louder. Still ball-less, Keith looked up, cap partially his vision, and saw his father cross the parking lot with quick, angry strides. He'd better get that Spaulding and return it to home base before the old man reached the stands. If Coach saw him, shit would fly. Keith dug into the hole and managed. He saw second and third had already made it to home, but there might be enough time to stop the effer who'd hit it in the first place. Why didn't you just bunt, you jerk? He pitched it in a straight line to the catcher, Mike DeForest, but missed the runner's left shoulder blade a half second too late. Keith threw his glove down and kicked its worn-out leather. An acid sun burned through the itchy fabric of his uniform. He saw the boiled lobster called his father cross the invisible territory of like an American into Cuba, then watched as Coach Vic caught sight and rose off the bench. He just lit up a Marlboro, but it got flicked to the ground with an arc of smoke and ash. A war started. The whole team stood in silent presence of the building crossfire, consisting mostly of vulgarities. Keith knew quite a few of those himself. He muttered them in a long string like a calming prayer. He sucked at baseball. He hated the game so much it kept him up. Sometimes he stretched across his bed, eyes directed up to the glittery popcorn scene, and thought of millions of ways to tell the old man how much he dreaded practice and all the stupid games he'd been forced to attend every summer of his almost 14-year-old existence. But not too much talking happened when it came to his dad. You shut the F up and listened. That's what talking to his dad meant. The team surged the stands. They wanted to see a fight in close proximity, maybe catch a drop of blood to come flying. Keith held his position in right field like a statue. A Kiss song started in his head. A few minutes later, he saw the inevitable. His dad heading straight for him and no one doing a damn thing to stop him. Just take your kid and get the hell out of here. Keith kept up the Kiss song ahead. It rose in volume until it was loud enough to block the screaming, belligerent voice in his face, spitting out words like bullets. His arm. Keith saw lips moving. He was being shaken, but he'd hear or feel a damn thing. Something smacked hard at his ear. It was Beautiful Bliss, the art of a survivor. Sometimes she didn't know what to think when his face went all blank like that. What gets in your head, kid? I don't know, Ma. It's like a record starts up in my brain. She started calling him Sony after that. Chapter 3, and I'll take a sip of water, and we switch back to Jane. So each chapter switches narratives. POV switch. POV. Now, I'm going to try not to say cuss words. If I slip one out, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I promised myself as a writer that I would never censor myself. So I'll try to do it here because it's YouTube, and if you want cuss words, you can go read the book and buy it. But I'll try to be careful because I know that, yeah, I can be creative. I can do that. So anyway, just know I'm sending some things. All right, chapter 3. Jane made it home by 5. The first thing she saw was Keith riding his bike in circles, then a car parked on the gravel strip he'd made a year ago to avoid nicks from handlebars. His duffel bag rested on the front steps. He hadn't taken off his uniform yet. He was hot and quiet with an underlying upset. Is your father inside? Jane asked. Yeah, he's inside. She tried the front door. Locked. Jane's stomach twisted. She made herself ignore the irrational questions going off in her head. Why is it? Dad's pissed. Battery. Dad's pissed, Keith said. He ran onto the field and then he grabbed me around the collar kind of rough, I guess, and started dragging me off the field. Coach lost. Keith ran a dirt-smudged hand under his nose. Where have you been? The store. Okay, well, Carl, I'll have to post it here later after my live. Thanks for being here. And yeah, I'll post it when I can. It's on Amazon, so if you look, it'll be there. And okay. And I'm sure I won't be able to read the whole book too, but you know. I appreciate you being here, love. You're welcome. Thanks for being here. I appreciate it very much. All right. Jane pictured the scene in her head. She could only think how glad she was for not being there to witness it herself. And by the way, Carl, I'm glad that you're going to. Actually, I'm like, that's one of the reasons why I do this too, is so that people want to read my book. So bye, Carl. Thank you. Have a beautiful day. I was glad you're here, and I'm happy that you're going to read the book. That makes me happy. So thank you. Okay, so Jane, she could only think how glad she was for not being there to witness it herself at the baseball fields. Look at you. You're overheated. Why didn't you take off the top at least? She felt the heat spreading under her clothes as well, an angry, uncontrollable heat. You could put a fuse on her neck and she would light up quick, ready to explode. She fished the front door key out of her handbag and inserted it into the lock. She and Key entered a room dark with early evening shadows. Grant lay on the couch, back-facing, feet scrunched up to his backside, like a fetus. She hated him saying his name. Grant! Did you lock Keith's side? He lost the game. So that doesn't mean he deserves to be locked out. It does if I say it does. Grant up and hunched over his knees. People lose all the time, she went on, heading to the kitchen. It was time to start dinner. Losing is part of the game. He needs to know that, the same as anyone else. Grant leaned inside the kitchen doorway. That boy purposefully missed those. He's trying to humiliate me. No, he's not. Jane saw Keith sneak past to go upstairs to his room. She tried to stop him, but he was already running. A few seconds later, she heard the door slam. She picked up the package of ground beef she bought at the store and punctured its paper with a knife tip. Blood came pouring out. He's not trying to humiliate you, she repeated. She turned the burner on and it hissed before flaming. Then she placed an iron skillet on top. If anything, he's trying to please you. I wanted to knock him to the ground. It sounds like you did. She was so tired. The whole day had worn her down. What? He's not trying to humiliate you, Grant. He's not even on his mind. His voice came from just behind. She felt the threat of stolen air. You always side with that boy. That boy? Jane let go of him and turned to him. You always refer to him like an outsider. Grant's eyes were insolence and acrimony. He looked her up and down. Where you been all afternoon? She returned her attention to the skillet. The scene at the store came into her mind. Huh? Grant grabbed her arm. The store? Jane shrugged him away. That man, despite all his friction and innuendo, had a gentleness about him, standing over her and then touching her. His hair would fall on both their faces. They would be hidden, and it would be lovely. If you'd been with me today, I wouldn't have gotten so mad. She broke up the meat as it cooked. The blood squeezed out and coagulated in the steaming grease. Sometimes grease gave her a weird kind of dizziness, like she could faint. She was fond of cooking meat. Suddenly, all things greasy and sick and overwhelming seemed to be Grant. He was too close, with too many accusations. Jane forgot about the man at the store. She was sick of hearing Grant complain. Worst was, he always blamed everyone else for his misgivings. If something went wrong, they became the reason and his target. She looked at the knife and felt her fingers squeeze into her palm. Don't blame me for your anger, she said. What was that? She knew he'd heard. If she elaborated on it, a fight would commence, and she was scared, not of him, but of herself. He wasn't the only one with anger boiling inside. Yes, Carl, I do more than that. I've written a lot. I told you I wrote a lot. I've written a lot. It's all these voices in my head, I tell you. Okay, keep going. Turned again and moved past to the refrigerator. I didn't say anything. Sometimes he wished he would just hit her. Thank you, Carl. Thank you. I appreciate that. Sometimes she wished he would just hit her so it would wake her up. But he never quite got to that point. He pushed and slapped and threatened many times, but never hit. It was almost like he knew the line, like a cat not biting into the jugular of his victim. He just played and played until she was too weak to scatter about. They ate a dinner of hash and sauerkraut with buttered bread and lemonade to drink. Grant sopped up the drippings with his bread, hunched over his plate, both elbows on the table. All dinner he'd been looking at them with suspicious glances until finally he sat back to finish his beer. "Do you know I closed the shop early this afternoon?" he asked Jane. "I guessed as much." "So that means kid here, who doesn't give a shit about anyone but himself, made me lose me as well as my temper." From the corner of her vision, Jane saw Keith slide a hand under the kitchen table to form a middle finger. "Well, it looks like you won't have to do that anymore," she said to Grant. "You bet your ass I won't. That baseball committee can go F themselves." Jane grabbed her lemonade and held it to her mouth. The glass was cool against her lips. "I am sick to death of being told what I can and can't do when it comes to coaching my son. Won't be handing out any special discounts when Coach comes marching in to get a new car, that's for sure. Boy, won't he get a shock. Yesterday, I need something new. You got any discounts today? Why, no. I don't. Not for you, that is." He chuckled and looked to his family, but Jane and Keith were quiet. Dinner had ended. Keith was only pushing food around on the plate. Jane wasn't hungry in the least, and Grant was only going to sit there and talk in that coarse way of his. She reached for the bread plate, but a hand slapped over hers in reprimand. "I was going to eat that last piece." She withdrew, and Grant grabbed the slice, followed by a ripping bite. "You're too taking things away. You got plans for the evening or something?" Grant looked at her with more of his suspicion. "Just to clean and take a bath." His attention moved to Keith. "Guess you won't be going to practice anymore. You happy with that?" Jane watched Keith's hands to make sure they didn't betray any anger. "I'm done eating," Keith said. "Can I go now?" Grant asked. "Upstairs? Don't you have a garage to clean?" "I was going to do that tomorrow, like I always do." Jane still couldn't get over seeing him outside, locked out for nothing more than a lost game. She'd given him his own. She'd give him his own key. That's what she'd do. Then Grant could never lock him again. She brushed a strand of hair off Keith's forehead. "That boy needs a haircut," Grant said. "Well, he said he wants to grow it out this summer. I'd let him." No more of those awful buzz cuts that made her son look like a miniature soldier. A passing thought of the now-ended war came into her mind, and Jane felt an instant sense of relief. Thank God Keith would never have to go to Vietnam. President Ford may be a fool, but at least he helped end the war. Looks like he's gay. "Mom, can I go now?" Jane nodded yes, and Keith shoved away from the table and ran upstairs. He said nothing, just sipped quietly at his beer until it was gone. Then he stood, threw the empty can into the trash. "That garage ain't going to clean itself." "I know." Jane grabbed the dishes off the table. "He'll do it tomorrow. Just let him do it on Saturday before." Grant stood and watched her clean for a long time. He came up and put his arms around her. Something she'd been afraid of. It was overwhelming. The smell of beer mixed with perspiration. His hand moved over her stomach and breast, his groin rubbed against her backside. Jane didn't deny him or encourage him. The dish rag came to rest at her throat, and it dripped tepid, moldy water into the top of her dress. Grant finally stepped away. Jane saw him take out a pouch of tobacco from his back pocket and insert a huge wad inside the loose cavern of his lower lip. He went to fish the empty can out of the trash for its spit cup. "Guess I'll go see what's on TV," he said, leaving. For a moment, Jane stood in the kitchen and stared at the sink, the knife. She hadn't washed it yet. Blood slicked at the blade. After a few minutes, she went away and resumed wiping the countertops. Then she went upstairs to take a bath. All right, I'm going to take a sip of water. Well, we're at Shore, my friends. I know I'm not going to get through this whole book. I'll probably just read a few more chapters, then I'll be done, because this is going to take forever to upload. But thank you again for Chapter 4. It was hotter than Satan's bunghole in Keith's room, but he'd rather be up there. See, I don't want to censor. Let me read that again. I don't want to censor. It was hotter than asshole in Keith's room, but he'd rather be up there than downstairs watching fights with his dad. Keith was still pissed. For one thing, his left ear wouldn't stop ringing, and that meant he couldn't hear Brian May's solos for shit. And another, it had really embarrassed him being hit like that in the game. Nobody else was getting slapped by their dad, just him. If he wasn't so short, it would never happen. One day, man, one day. Keith glanced up and caught sight of his image in the dresser mirror. It's like a fag. That's what his dad had said. He stared for a very long time, long enough to make the edges of his body blur and melt into a ghost-like haze. When his dad said things like that, he wanted to scream back, "Yeah, you're right. I am," just to make him lose it. Then, after the old man screamed and turned red for a good 10 minutes, really gotten himself into a frenzy, Keith would laugh and say, "Just kidding. I like boobies. Want me to go get one of your penthouses to prove it?" Or in a box in the garage's upper left shelf right next to the Valvoline. A crap load of it. One of the perks of cleaning every Saturday. He broke away from his image and flipped through a car magazine. Man, I'd die for a Charger. Pull into the school parking lot with a brand new Charger. It would make people crazy. He checked the interior pictures, all that leather and chrome and the car's guts, the tires and the front end. You can almost smell the beast through the glossy paper. And Keith did. He sniffed the paper. Then he tore off a piece and shoved it into his mouth. Celeste swirled around to make pulp. Of course, he couldn't get anything more than a learner's permit right now, but some kids drove to school and back and all over town and never got to the cops. So he figured he could do the same. His dad had already promised to get driving lessons since he was turning 14 and all, and he'd better not turn back on that promise. Keith flipped the magazine to another page, a cruddy Dodge Dart. Too bad his mother hated cars, or he'd ask her to teach him instead of his dad. Keith couldn't figure out how she'd ended up married to a car dealer when she hated cars so much. Keith couldn't figure out any reason his parents had gotten together. And there he was. He lowered the magazine to stare at himself in the mirror again, mouthing a Freddie Mercury vocal. He ripped off the headphones and let them drop to the floor. The magazine fell to the floor as well. He went to the mirror, closer look. A zit? Another zit? They're coming like the pox now, one after the other. He poked at it. Ouch. Something throbbed deep under the skin. Maybe it was just a mark from a rock that had flown up from his back tire. He also saw a few scraggly hairs on his jawline and above his lip. He'd shaved them, but maybe they'd grow into a beard or something if he waited. Did he really look gay? Well, what the hell do people look like anyway except Liberace? Shit, he didn't look as gay as that. No way. He spread his legs out in a stance, cocked his head to the right and flipped his longish hair. All the kids at school called him gay too, just because he hadn't grown yet. Not like the stiffs who played football. He guessed that was it, his height. Keith reached a hand down and felt. In the locker room, he'd seen everything. There were some boys who were huge and others that were average. He was average, he guessed. Not that size could determine being gay or not. There was no way to determine that, except having sex with a chick. Then you'd know. Except the world would know. Fuck, he letting go. Chapter 5. Jane brushed her hair while running the bath. The first she did was open the window so a breeze could come in. Then she sat on the tub's rim listening to the sound of locusts and a distant train blasting through town. When the bath filled up halfway, she let her robe fall to the floor before sticking a toe. Too hot. She added more cold. She saw her reflection in the bathroom mirror. Jane didn't typically examine herself unclothed, but on this night she was more conscious of things. The height report lay split open on the sink counter at the place she'd stopped reading. The women inside the book had repeated a similar idea. Their bodies were beautiful objects of pleasure to stimulate and bring climax to, and they didn't need any man to aid in the process. They did it, how they did it, and how often. Though the idea of men wasn't necessarily looked down upon, it was merely suggested a woman didn't require one as pre thought. As a child, Jane had always been told that touching herself was a sin. No one spoke about menstruation, the risks of becoming pregnant. She'd had to learn those things on her own. There were little adverts in magazines about contraceptives and feminine wash, and spoke of such things directly. And they didn't speak about pleasure. You learned on your wedding night that the rough, brutish touch of a man brought the gift. Succumbing. Succumbing meant belonging. Pleasure was assumed. The water was too cold now, but Jane got in anyway. The house was thick with heat and she wanted a tepid bath, so it was fine. She ran a bar of ivory soap over herself. She never washed with the bare hand, only with the washcloth. Tonight, she decided to wash without it. Sorry, this is TMI, but I'm going to get part. Sorry. She felt a tingling inside, a heat, but mostly she felt guilt, Catholic guilt. She looked toward the bathroom door to make sure it had been locked properly. It had. In a few minutes, she felt too ashamed. She stopped and ran cold water on her feet to break away from the indecent thoughts she'd been having. Thoughts of the man she'd met at the store in town. They weren't the first indecent thoughts she'd had of him, not at all. But now she'd spoken to him, and a river had been unleashed. She'd wanted to accept his offer to ride on the Harley. She'd wanted him to do more for things she couldn't even think, much less put into words. But the whole idea lurid. Besides, she was a married woman. It was wrong to think about other men while married to someone else. Jane ended right off. When she heard Grant outside shuffling down the hall, she hurried up and threw on a robe so he wouldn't come in and see her naked. He rattled the knob. He had to pee because of all that beer. Pretty soon he was knocking. "Jane, you in there?" Jane let him in and left the bathroom quickly to avoid any talk. Than anything, she didn't want to see him urinate. It wasn't until after that she remembered that she'd left the book on the sink counter. "Damn it," she whispered in the hall, fingers curved on the doorknob. She regretted buying it now. She wasn't like those women, couldn't do the kind of things they described inside those pages. The new female generation was too bold. They hadn't been taught about modesty as she had. "Damn it," she repeated, wondering what was keeping Grant so long. She went into their bedroom and sat on the mattress edge, stomach knitted into a tight bundle. She wondered if she left it there on purpose to hurt Grant. Maybe she was growing more independent. She liked the idea of doing something spiteful. In a few minutes he appeared in the doorway. "What's this?" he asked, holding up the book. Jane didn't answer. "I've been reading through this book here, and I tell you what, this thing is full of filth. You been reading this, Jane?" She said nothing. She got up off the bed and went to the dresser. Her nightgown was on top, and she'd just put it on and then brush her hair again and wait for Grant to cool down. That's what she'd do. That's exactly what she'd do. A hand grabbed her arm and turned her around. "Huh? I asked you if you'd been reading this thing." "Yes," she answered. "Yes, I read it. I'm a grown woman, Grant. I was curious." "Curious about what?" Turned away. I don't know. My body. Things." She wished he wasn't holding the book. Part of him took no ownership of it. She really hated in that book now. "You know, it says that I've been doing something wrong," he said. "That I can't make you happy or something. You know what I say, Jane?" Her hand stopped her wrist from grabbing the hairbrush off the dresser. "I say there ain't nothing wrong with me. That I say. What do you think, Jane?" She shook her head. "I just don't know, Grant. It's only a book." "You think there's something wrong?" He was drunk. He spun her around again and watched as he brought the book to his mouth. He ripped the pages with his bare teeth. "Stop it, Grant. It's ridiculous to do something like that." "There ain't nothing wrong with me," he repeated when half the pages were lying on the floor. Then he pulled her to the bed and began to have sex with her, even though she hated him. The only thing Jane could think of was to ask for him to go lock the bedroom door. He wasn't as nice as he usually was. Jane gritted her teeth and let him do what he felt he had to do. If it made him calm down, if it got her out of trouble, she'd let him do it. When his climax came many minutes later and he'd adjusted himself, he rolled off. Neither of them spoke. Another train went by, and finally Grant said something about TV and got up to get dressed. He left. Jane stared at the ceiling. There were cracks and stains up there she'd never seen before. She left the bed, adjusted the nightgown, and combed her hair, and then gathered all those pages. She'd never read the Height report again. She was like those women. Grant stood in the kitchen with a new beer. Smiling, he watched her walk in with an armload of the book, sucked inside Jane, like a rubber band inside her spine. She began slapping him. "I hate you! I hate you!" He tried to grab her, but Jane was half crazy. "I'm going to call the police," she said, to scare him a little. But Grant had no fear of the law. Half the cops in town bought cars from him. Jane went at him with her fists. Everything in her, all that tiredness, the heat, the dishes, the nights of sitting in a hot complaints, the way he treated Keith, his eyes when he pinned her down under his body like nothing, turned him into an object to destroy in any way possible. Fists, claws, she tore at his clothes. And all this anger, she could feel him fighting back as well. Grant managed to encase her fist inside of one of his large hands, then he shoved her to the floor. She scrambled up before a boot made contact with her face. It shocked her, about to hurt her so viciously, but she always knew he wouldn't stop once provoked. Finally. And now that she'd started something, he was 10 times worse than she'd imagined. She felt like she was in a tornado with objects, and she couldn't control anything, her thoughts, her movements, her eyes, her words. Keith appeared at the doorway. He began to sputter. Grant left her to go beat at him, and all Jane could think was to grab the knife. A whole lifetime passed while she looked at it there in the chipped and stained sink. "Stop!" Grant shoved Keith away and approached Jane. "Whoa, now. Put that thing down. Put that thing down." How he could go from beating his own child to sounding so rational really surprised her. It made her bitter because he was protecting himself. "Get out." It was a shock to him. It was his house, after all. He'd made all the payments. But the only thing beside the money that he'd contributed was the dark obscurity of loneliness and fear. For 1 second, Jane childhood and what it had been like, the whippings, the strict father and silent mother, and it wasn't his entire fault. "Get out," she repeated, much calmer. "I don't want you in this house anymore." Blood dripped from one of his eyes where she'd apparently given him an official plug. Deep inside, she felt happy. Good. Blood. He limped as he left. Still held the knife. After the front screen door rattled shut and the car door slammed finally outside, Keith turned with a look of shock. "You didn't have to make him leave." My neighbors probably think I'm having a big fight in here. Okay, chapter 6. You want me to keep going? If not, I'll stop. I'll read a couple more chapters. I am at page 30. And we're in almost an hour. Chapter 6. This is Keith now. Scrambling off the floor, Keith ran outside and grabbed his 10-speed. His dad's Chrysler was already heading up the block, so he mounted in a frenzy to get his feet going. His face was sopped with sweat and tears. His left cheek still smoked from the smack he'd received. But right now, what hurt more was that life had no ropes, and that it was dark and violent, like a Coke bottle being shaken up. Everything he said was an obscenity. He would kill his father, beg him to come back. He would kill himself, pedal right in front of the Chrysler, anything to make this stop. God damn him. Why couldn't he be a normal father just for once? Fuck. I hate you, Dad. He pedaled hard and sweat excreted from his pores and ran down into his eyes. The Chrysler drove too fast. It kept turning corners of town Keith wouldn't have thought to turn before. It didn't go to the liquor store or the car lot where his father worked. No, it went to where houses were smaller, older, where dogs sat on chains, and cars were leaking oil, filling up the driveway. It pulled up to a little white house with a sagging front porch, and the taillights died. Keith pedaled to a stop underneath a large maple. He heard the sound of his father cranking up the gear shift. The man walked to the house's front door, knocked, and went in. A woman answered. A woman. She was overweight and plain in the face. Keith's breath caught and swelled in his throat. It seared and burned. 1,000 wasps nested there, were thrashing their stingers into the softness of his inner flesh. He saw the shadow of figures beyond the curtains of a front window, and it was so silent, not even the locusts made a sound. A train came and went. It must have been an hour. His legs went numb, his hands clutched at his bike handle, and he stood there waiting for his father to come out, because that's what was supposed to happen. But it didn't. His father never came, and all of Keith's previous feelings of honor, of love, of devotion for a man who had never worked to deserve such honor or love or devotion at all, they left him. Chapter 7. Of the Moonflowers. Chapter 7. Jane cleaned the kitchen for a second time that night and called Suzanne. He's gone. She pressed the receiver to her ear and twisted the phone's spiral cord with restless fingers. Through the earpiece, she could hear the sound of a television blasting away and the talk and laughter of wild children. Who's gone? Suzanne asked. I could hardly say his name. It was bitter and wrapped with the guilt of her actions. You mean Grant? Are you talking about Grant? Or Keith? What's going on? We had a fight just a short time ago. I couldn't take it anymore. I almost killed him. My battery's dying. Uh-oh. Battery. So I don't have much time left. I could come back on later. We had a fight just a short time ago. I couldn't take it anymore. I almost killed him with Suzanne. Thank God when he did. You know what? I do have a charger, so I'll come back later and whatever. Hold on. There was a sound of Suzanne shifting the phone to a muted position on her body. When the phone lifted, the television had been turned down considerably. All of that again, because I'm having trouble believing my own ears. Jane enunciated so that it was clear, very clear, what she had to say. I almost killed Grant, she said. I thought that said. Suzanne fell into a new silence, one of her own making. Jane wondered if she was in shock, or if she might be pleased. Just a few hours earlier, she'd been begging Jane to do something about her marriage, and now Jane had, in the worst kind of way. I'm horrible. Oh, hell, you're not horrible. You just waited too long. It was all built up, and it came to this, I guess. Poor thing. But you're not horrible at all. Jane couldn't tell her that, and she didn't want to think about it either, so she changed the subject. Keith's gone. I think he's following his father around, but I don't know. My head is all screwed up right now. If you see Suzanne, will you tell him to come home? She started to cry, and there were different tears than before. Then she had cried out of fear and stress, and now she just felt sorry because her son would never forgive her. If I see him, I'll tell him. It sounded like Suzanne had gone outside to the back porch. Wind chimes jangled, and a soft breeze breathed into the phone's receiver. Are you okay, though? She asked, followed by the crackle of a cigarette being lit and the soft and intake of a drag. I'm as good as I can be, shaken up. How am I supposed to feel? Suzanne let out a bitter laugh. Well, personally, I'd be relieved. It's about time you did something to get him out of that. You know how I feel? So I won't go into it. It really is about damn time. She took another drag, a long one. Do you have any liquor? Jane turned to the kitchen cabinet then before going over to open one above the sink. There's half a bottle of gin in here, some whiskey, and some muscatel. Honey, do yourself a favor. Don't drink the muscatel. Have some gin. That'll make you feel better. Maybe I should come over. You want me to? The gin smelled like it could strip paint off old furniture. Jane wasn't a drinker. She didn't have the stomach for it anymore. And it was late, and it was hot. Liquor made you hot. But she did, perhaps a little liquor would help. Stay home, she said, setting the bottle down onto the counter. I'm too depressed to have you come over. I'd rather be alone. Anyway, I just need to go out and look for Keith. Oh, honey, he'll be fine. Fresh air. Hey, listen, I'll send Sasha out to look for him. Would you like that? Then he can come over here and stay the night so you can drink in peace. There was an old woman reflected in the kitchen window, and Jane must have aged 10 years in the course of one night. No husband. Who would want her now? Her bloom had long since faded. She'd wasted it on him, and he'd crushed it beyond recognition. She grabbed the bottle with the torn label and poured a quick glass and drank it down while her friend was going on about things like how time had come and Jane was a strong woman and sometimes the marriages just didn't work out for certain people. You still there? I'm still here, she said to Suzanne. Let me come over. I don't mind. I'm worried about you. Jane thought that gin was weaker than she had expected. It wasn't rich and bold like whiskey. What she needed was some good old moonshine, the kind her father made before it became to do. He could make some real good stuff, and if anything, it'd get you drunk fast. But Jane poured another small glass of gin and swallowed it down. I'll be all right, she said. It's good that you didn't kill him, said Suzanne. Is because if you had, you ended up in jail. So maybe something else will kill him, like from somewhere unexpected, and I hope it does. You shouldn't say that, Jane felt like laughing. The image of something flying out of the sky to kill Grant did seem rather funny and providential. A savage hawk, debris from a passing jet plane, a dead tree. Anything would do. She started to giggle and Suzanne asked her what for. Nothing, I just imagined Grant struck to the ground with a big tree on top of him. Oh God, I'm going to end up in hell thinking things like that. Are you drinking already? Yes. Damn, I wish I was there with you. Jane was coming back. She was a mess inside her skin. No, you stay home and please do ask Sasha to look for Keith. I'm worried about him, Suzanne. Have I done the right thing? I can answer that without any reservations. You have. Bye, Fatima. Love you. You have a beautiful weekend, too. Keith will be better for it, though it may not seem like it right now. You did do the right thing, and I'll help you get through this. Just tell me what you need, and I'll help you. I know you will. Jane was ready to hang up. The tears were overwhelming, and she didn't want to cry. But she would if they kept talking. I'll call you tomorrow. Make sure you do, or I'll be calling you. Hell, I'll be at your front door. Hey, don't drink too much, okay? It was probably too late to heed that advice. Jane's toes already felt fuzzy. It was a nice feeling, though. She stumbled upon hanging up the phone. Gin was a bland liquor, and now that she'd started, she would move to anything else in fear of a hangover. She wouldn't move on to anything else in fear of a hangover. She stood in the kitchen's arched doorway for a long time, looking at the empty room. She couldn't bring herself to sit on the couch. That sagging old had concaved into the print of Grant's body. Instead, she sat on the fireplace hearth and took a small little sip while the night faded into quiet. Keith returned. She went back into the kitchen and grabbed hold of the gin bottle. She read its label. Then she poured the rest of its contents into the sink and threw the empty bottle into the trash. This night was over forever. The gin might as well be too. She was grateful for the bath she still had when she slipped into the old bed that used to be one of matrimony and misery. Across the hall should be a young man sleeping too. Everything seemed changed all at once, and she allowed it to exactly in that manner. Her last thought before closing her eyes was that it felt good to have the bed to herself. No one would threaten her tonight, or ever again. All right, I think I'm going to end it here for now. So as you know, and we got to chapter 8 of The Moonflowers, whoops, by Joni Abilene. That's my pen name. And there we go, The Moonflowers. So thanks, and you guys, happy 4th of July, even though it's crazy right now. Yeah, thanks for being here. Have a great weekend, and bye.